In several of his books, Andrew Newberg, and in his collaborations with Newberg and D'Aquili, he proposes a series of what he calls cognitive operators. And the books I'm thinking about here are Mystical Mind and Why God Won't Go Away. But I think there's also journal articles as well which propose the same kind of thing, which are, as I say, these cognitive operators. I don't know to what extent it's an entirely valid idea, but it's worth pursuing, I think. I'm enjoying pursuing it. What cognitive operators are in Newberg and D'Aquili's sense is kind of routines or computational algorithms, I guess, something like that in the brain, which process the data from the world and carry out quite specific operations on that sensory data that we're constantly flooded with to kind of make sense of it. I think there's about 8 of these operators. I can't remember them all, but the ones that stand out are the binary operator, which divides experience into 2 kinds. So we tend to make a kind of primary distinction between a set of data into 2 sets in terms of opposites, and assign different values to those opposites. Up, down, left, right, forward, back, black, white, good, bad, all those kind of data. So that's the processes of the binary operator. The abstractive operator, I think, is one of them, which seems to be the one that leads to things I've spoken about before, schema and gist and fuzzy traces, those kind of things, in which the essential structures of repeated experiences is drawn out, and the details are dismissed, so that we remember things by certain abstract qualities, structural qualities. So, for example, when we see a chair, we're not gobsmacked because we've never seen a particular chair before. We have some kind of abstract understanding of what a chair is that we apply each time we see one. And in Newberg and D'Aquili's terms, the ability to do that is the workings of the abstractive operator. What else? The one I'm trying to get to here, which I can't remember the bloody name of course, is the one that binds things together. It might be called the binding operator, I don't know. But it's one that, I think it's called the holistic operator, actually. I think that's it. Which allows us to pull different bits of potentially isolated or distributed data together and see them as a whole. So when we see what I'm seeing here, little clumps of trees, I'm not seeing individual trees, I'm seeing clumps of trees, or forests, that kind of thing. It enables me to see a bunch of flowers rather than 12 individual flowers. It enables me to see this field of grass rather than millions and millions of blades of grass individually. So the holistic operator clumps things together, and the if you like, the opposite one to that is, I think, the reductive operator, which is exactly the opposite. It takes a composite stimulus, or one which presents itself as a composite, and breaks it down into elements. So although I am able to see that my first glance at this tree sees it as a tree, I am able to also decompose it into branches and leaves and so on. And my ability to do that in these terms is because I am able to mobilize the reductive operator. Now there are others. I think there's 3 or 4 that I've just cited are amongst a group of about 8 or 9 different basic functions. And one of the things the reason why I'm citing this is 2 reasons actually. One, I think it's quite interesting to relate that list of what seem to be entirely physical, brain-based cognitive functions. If I remember rightly, Newberg and D'Aquili even cite areas of the brain which seem to be active when those processes are going on, so it seems to have a neurological instantiation. But what's interesting about them is that they also seem to figure in other sorts of processes. I mean, certainly some processes for the conscious mobilization of creativity draw on those kinds of things. I'm thinking of synectics, for example. I think there was a guy called Altschuler who came up with synectics, I'm not absolutely sure. Which is just a series of trigger terms that you apply to a piece of material. So if you're trying to, I don't know, come up with an advertising campaign for a particular product, you would take these trigger terms and apply it to the product and see if something happened. And those trigger terms are very similar to the cognitive operators of Newberg and D'Aquili. So you would look at the product and break it down into elements. So you would look at the product and see how it abstracts, or some of the various different things you can do there. So that's one thing which I think is quite interesting. And it also features with other creative strategies like Scamper and Trace and one or two other things, formalized strategies. Sorry, my dog just seems to be choking to death. You're right there, guy. Hello. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing, which I think is potentially more interesting, is I'm just wondering where this data comes from, or what this data is prior to its processing. Because obviously, if these are cognitive processes, if these are primary brain computational strategies, if you like, then they are working on some kind of data. And they are producing the sense of the world. They are producing the experience of trees and the experience of leaves on those trees, and the experience of those trees being parts of forests and so on. So it doesn't really make sense to say that the tree, or the forest, or the leaf precedes my processing of it. So I don't really have access to that. So I'm just trying to get a sort of sense of myself about, you know, what kind of information is being made available to these cognitive processes. Does it make sense to try to define that information? Does it collapse into solipsism or idealism? Does it turn into a shimmering database? I think I've spoken of before. Or is it all just total bollocks, really? The jury is out.